up, I had a German Shepherd, and her name was Heidi, and she was the most amazing dog. Although she was my brother's dog, and he was, 16 years old and testosterone-ridden, he trained her to do some things I didn't think were quite right. But I grew up eating popcorn. I grew up in a popcorn family where every Friday night you had a movie and popcorn. And so Heidi would sit right there, and this dog loved popcorn. And she would sit at attention. You know that, dog attention. And she would sit there, and we would take a piece of popcorn, and cruel though it may seem, we would put it on the end of her long snout. And she would sit there with that popcorn on the end of her nose. And she would just stare at it, like that. And we would leave her there for an inordinate amount of time. And we just thought this was the greatest thing. Cruel, but the thing was, she demonstrated great willingness. This dog was willing to sit there as long as he needed to in order to get that piece of popcorn off his nose. And all you had to do was go, get it. And all of a sudden, that popcorn was off the nose, in the mouth, and down the throat, and you never saw it happen. And then she'd sit there again, she'd go, we'd put another piece of popcorn on the end of her nose. And she'd sit there. And we'd say, get it. And she'd do it over and over and over. She never tired of it because she had a goal. The goal was, I want some popcorn. And so we used to work with her to do the popcorn trick. And Heidi was a wonderful, loyal, courageous dog. And she did amazing things. She could sail over 6-foot fences, then Dad put up a higher fence. And then she could sail over the higher fence. And when there was a problem in the neighborhood, the police would come by and they would knock on the door and they'd say, we need to take Heidi with us. And so she would just go out and get in the police car and they would take her. And she'd be sitting in the back seat going down the road with a smile on her face. The minute they got to the place where something was going on, they'd simply go, Heidi, sick 'em. And up came the fangs. And she'd be after him. But see, she was just willing to do whatever the situation called for. And willingness is really the most important thing that anybody can have. Because, you can read every book that's published out there, but you have to actually do what the book says in order for it to work. And so you see, willingness is this open state of mind. And it's when you have an open state of mind that, in fact, you can receive some power. The minute you close yourself up, that's when the power is limited. So you've got to be in this willing state of mind. And when you think about your life, you have a lifeline. You have a place on your line where you popped into this earth. And on that day, your mama held you and said, oh, ain't it sweet? It's got lots of potential. It could do anything it wants to. And we've grown up, and now we are, some of us, halfway down the lifeline, and some of us 3/4 way down the lifeline. But here's the thing, we still have some time to go. My mentor, her name is Ann Starrett. She's the most amazing 80-pound, 62-year-old woman you have ever met. She's amazing. And she told me this January, just a couple weeks ago, she said, Nicole, I only think I have about 25 good years left in me. And I thought, isn't that amazing? 62, and she still thinks she has 25 good years left. She's like, I've got to get busy. I'm like, oh, this is why I hang out with you. You are amazing. And that is how we need to be. We need to be thinking about what can I do in the time that I have. I have to be willing to engage. And willingness is this place where you say, without judgment or reservation or refusal, I am going to take the next right step. But what are you stepping towards? What do you really want to have that future self look like, that person at the end of your life? What do you want that person to look like? And you have to get very clear. Now, I am a path coach, and a path coach helps people get on their ordained path, helps them figure out what were they born to do, and how can we get them going the right direction. And the first question I ask people is, what do you really want? And they all look dumbfounded when I ask them this question because they have never taken the time to really begin to think about what are the things that they really desire and really want out of their lives. And you've got to know what that end future self looks like in order to be able to get on the path. And there are 3 perspectives inside of path coaching. The first one is I've got to get the introspective. I've got to look out to the future and describe in detail what that looks like that I want. So I actually transport myself through coaching, through asking curious questions. I can help a client figure out what exactly it is that they want. And then we're out there in the future, and we turn around and we look back, and we go all the way back to the present place. And that is the retrospective. Because you see, coaching is about figuring out what the retrospective is, but not to the past, because there's nothing we can do about it. We can only deal with the future and the retrospective back to the present. And that is a new way of being retrospective. So you go out to the future and you say, if this is what I really want, those are the things I must do to get them done. Now, here's the very cool thing. When you go out and you come back, you're going to see very different things. Edwin Way Teal said, no path is truly trod until it is trod both ways. And isn't that true? You take a hike in the woods and you go out and you come back and you see it from a whole new perspective. Now, the neat thing, when those two come together, that introspective and that retrospective, you all of a sudden start to get very creative. You start to see things in new ways. And you get what we call the prospective. You know, pro as in propel, the thing that's going to drive me forward, get me where I want to go. So we come up with 3 perspectives and work through those. We work through the introspective, the retrospective, and then start the creativity with the prospective. Now, there's a mandate in one of my favorite books. It's called The Message by Eugene Peterson. And in there it says, make a careful exploration of who you are and the work you've been given to do. And that's what we've determined out there in the future self, the work that you are supposed to be doing with your life, your calling. Then at that point, you need to sink yourself into it. But don't compare yourself with others. You have a responsibility for doing your creative best with the life you've been given. And that is a mandate that I take very, very seriously. And so I try to help people actually move into that place where they actually start to become their future self. But in order to do that, you have to be willing, correct? When I was down in Mexico about 3 Easters ago, I had the privilege of getting up on Easter morning and being taken to church. And so in my mind's eye, you know, where I'm on vacation, I'm thinking I'm going to go to a beautiful old church with mahogany and stained glass windows. It's going to be absolutely gorgeous. I'm going to go to this beautiful church. So we get into the car in our broken Spanish. We ask the gentleman who's driving the taxi, please take us to church. He says, all right, you know, yes, I understand. We're like, you sure you understand? Yes, I understand. So, okay. So we get in the car and we start driving along. We get to this place. There is no church. There's no large building with a steeple on top, with stairs that ascend to a grand pair of front doors. No, there's 3 sets of cinder block walls and a bunch of palm trees and about 200, you know, those plastic lawn chairs from Walmart that are white with big Corona labels all across the back of them. Doesn't God have a sense of humor? And so these chairs are lined up, but there are palm trees swaying overhead. And the gentleman says, you know, I think he said, this is my church. And so what do you say? Thank you very much for driving us to Su Iglesia. So we go in and we sit down, and it isn't quite what we expected. But we had to be willing to go inside, because when we got inside, we really saw some great things. All of a sudden, we're getting in there, and we're sitting down. All of a sudden, this mariachi band comes out. Now, I don't imagine in the big, you know, mahogany church with the stained glass windows they have mariachi bands, but it's Easter, and I don't know if you've ever been to Mexico at Easter time. They really know how to do Easter upright. It is a major fiesta. And so the mariachi band comes in, it's very lively, and people are filing in, and we're sitting down. Now, about 3 rows in front of me, there is a little girl, and down there, they all dress to the nines. And this little girl has lace and fluff and ribbons and bows, and it goes on and on. And she is adorable, and she has tons of enthusiasm, and I just really love enthusiasm. And she was sitting up there, and so I was just getting tickled watching her, you know. And people would come up to her mother, and her mother would go, "See my daughter," and she'd, "Oh, it's me." And they did this whole thing, and everybody was talking in Spanish. And so we were just kind of in this total observation place, right? Just watching everything going on. Well, the service started getting going, and the priest, came and walked up the side of the church. And I am not Catholic, but that's your choice when you go to Mexico, and that was fine with us. So I was curious, too, about the different traditions and the things that they would do. And so the priest was coming down the aisle, and as he was coming down, he had this vessel that was beautiful, very ornate, and it had water in it, and he had like a silver paddle. And he proceeded to dip the paddle into the water and start shaking it on the entire group. And I thought, oh, it's like he's blessing us. Okay, cool, I love this. I'll take a blessing. And so he was walking down the aisle. Now, most people were leaning in. They were, willing to receive this blessing. And it was really cool. I thought, we should do this, in Cheryl's Ford, where I'm at. And so he's coming down the thing, and he's coming around. Now, I peeked around to go look at my little enthusiastic girlfriend up here, that I was keeping my eye on. And, you could see the anticipation on her face. She's like, I'm going to get some too. And even though she, didn't speak the same language as me, I could look right in her face and see what was going on in her head. And so the priest is coming around, and I easily leaned in and got sprinkled. And I thought, I got it, got my blessing. I was willing, I leaned in, I got it. And then he goes down, and he's, doing like this, and the little girl was too short, and it was too crowded, and she didn't get a drop. And you know that international, intercultural look on a child's face that says, I didn't get any. Yeah, she turned around and did that to her mother, and her mother gave her that international, intercultural look that said, don't worry about it, stay right there. But before her mother knew it, that little girl came out from the edge of that row, and she ran all the way to the front, and by that time the priest was already at the front, had put his vessel and his paddle down. And she runs up to the front, she throws her arms in the air, and she says, "Ami, which means, at me. And the whole place goes silent. And the priest turns around, looks at her, bends down, gets in her face, and this smile starts to come out from side to side from that priest. Just a minute. Another international, intercultural sign. Just a minute. And he goes and gets his paddle and his vessel, and he comes back and he dips it in, and he proceeds to really douse her with good measure. And she was just loving it. And in that moment, she was just tickled to death. She had been willing to get what she really wanted. I mean, she broke the rules. She got away from, the restrictions and the limited thinking, and she ran down. She was willing to do whatever it took to get her blessing. And so that is the way it is with us. If we will simply break out of the crowd, come out and go forward and just go, I'm ready. Give it to me. And take on the things that we know we can do when we visit who our future self is. So if you don't know who your future self is, I'd be glad to sit with you and talk to you about figuring that out. I can ask you some great questions, help you formulate a strategy, put some systems in place, and share with you the smarts that I have inside of Vibrant Coaching. So it's been my pleasure to be here with you today. Let me know if it's you, it's you, it's you. Thank you.